Welcome to this special edition for the 10 years of presidency of President Ali Bongo Ondimba. Our guest, Dr. Lee White, presently Minister of Forest, Oceans, Environment and Climate Change of Gabon, first set foot in Gabon in 1989. He was appointed head of Wildlife Conservation Society in 1997. In 2002, he was appointed as an advisor to the President of the Republic on issues related to climate change by former President Omar Bongo in 2002. Since June 2019, he was appointed as Minister of Forest, Oceans, Environment and Climate Change. Good morning, Dr. White.
Hello there.
So we're going to tackle the matter just straight. 10 years after the beginning of President Ali Bongo Ondimba's presidency, the results speak for themselves. On the environmental front, we witness a strong involvement of a fight against global warming and more. Can we say today that these efforts are beginning to bear fruit?
The first big meeting that President Ali Bongo Ondimba attended after he became president was the Copenhagen Climate Change Conference, where over 100 heads of state came together to try and save the planet, to deal with climate change. Now, that conference is seen as a bit of a failure. We didn't come up with the plan that we eventually came up with in Paris. But for President Bongo, that really saw him emerge on the international stage as somebody fighting climate change, somebody fighting for sound environmental governance, somebody fighting for sustainable development, somebody looking for a new way, a new mode of development for Africa, whereby we could develop our country, but at the same time preserve our natural ecosystems and fight against climate change. So I think over the last 10 years, we've seen the president emerge as one of the leaders amongst all heads of state on these issues. At every single conference, he is invited, and when he's not there, Gabon is always given an important place in these international fora. So we've made a lot of progress in terms of Gabon's leadership. We've made some progress in terms of fighting climate change with the Paris Agreement, where, again, Gabon played a very important role with the minister at the time, Minister Issoze, co-chairing the finance discussions. But we haven't yet got to the point where we've done enough to deal with climate change. So we need the president, we need him to be engaged for more years, unfortunately, because the rest of the planet is not behaving in the same way as Gabon and a few other countries that are really showing an example.
Okay. So, according to what you just said, can we say without fear that Gabon is now a reference in the fight against global warming in Africa?
Absolutely. Gabon is perhaps the reference in Africa for the fight against climate change. Gabon has just signed an agreement with the Norwegian government, which is the government that puts the most funding into dealing with climate change, because of all of the policies the president has put in place over the last 10 years, which has resulted in Gabon having one of the lowest levels of deforestation anywhere on the planet, having one of the highest levels of forest. And so the fact that Gabon has signed an agreement with Norway to recognize this leadership is a clear statement by somebody other than me, the Minister of Forestry. It's the Minister of Environment and Climate Change in Norway who's signing the agreement and who is telling the world that Gabon is a real leader and this is the country in Africa that they want to work with.
Speaking about this agreement, speaking about this deal with Norway, how did things really happen? How did we reach this level?
Sometimes when you're trying to catch up, you don't think about the environmental damage. You just think about how much money you can earn to catch up in terms of development. But Omar Bongo said that that was a mistake, that we had to find a new development path for Africa. And coming out of Rio, he adopted the first environment law in Gabon in 1993. He then modified the forestry code to oblige logging companies to do sustainable management. He then created the national parks, cancelling over 2 million hectares of logging concessions. And then when President Ali Bongo was elected, his first big decision was to ban the export of raw timber.
Okay.
We were mining timber. We were cutting trees and sending them to Europe or to America or to China, where they were transformed into very high value products, but all of the value was realized offshore.
Yeah.
Gabon was getting very little money for its forests. And I'm a strong believer as Minister of Forests that if the forest is not seen as a precious commodity, if we don't give the forest its true value, then we will not look after it. And so that decision to ban the export of raw timber, even though it was very criticized at the time, President Sarkozy got in his plane and he came to Gabon to try and convince the president that it was a mistake. But the president stuck to his guns, and we see today the fruits of that. We see today the G16, the Nkok. I'm opening, as Minister of Forestry, I'm opening a new factory every month as investors come into Gabon to transform our wood into high-value products, creating jobs, creating wealth here in Gabon. So we can make more money from less wood, and that way we can preserve our forests. The president then created the Climate Council. We did the Plan Climat. He signed the Sustainable Development Law in 2014. And so we've seen an evolution in policy that has resulted in better management of our forests, better preservation of the forest, and it's that long process which is attracting donors like Norway, because they see that it's not a flash in the pan, it's not a short-term vision. It's been a long, sustained vision where two presidents have worked in a strategic way to try and get to the point where instead of cutting our forest down to develop, we can keep our forests standing to develop. And then we can contribute to the fight against climate change. Then we maintain our natural capital. Then we maintain the water and the weather patterns that the forest generates. And by behaving in that way, we show an example to the rest of the world that if Gabon can find a way to develop whilst preserving, then the rest of the world should be able to do that as well.
Okay, about policies and about, you've been speaking about how leadership can help these kind of things to happen. Speaking of national parks, in 10 years of exercise, what policy has President Bongo Ondimba put in place for them to contribute to the gross domestic product of Gabon? Because we know that people are speaking, they say we are protecting areas, we are removing some land from the people, as we can say, but how do we benefit? How much money do we get from this?
When President Omar Bongo created the parks, he didn't move anybody out of the parks. We didn't steal the land from the people. We created the land, we created the parks with the people. Parks contribute to the economy in many different ways. Parks contribute to the economy through tourism, and everybody sees the parks and tourism, and the tourism has started very slowly, and it makes us ask questions. Parks also contribute in many other ways. If you like eating fish or prawns. All of the fish we eat in Libreville is born in the mangroves in Pongara and Akenda National Parks. So if we want to keep eating fish into the future, if you want your children to be able to eat fish from the ocean, then we have to keep those national parks. The electricity that is making this television studio work, half of it comes from the Mont de Cristal National Park, from the barrage in Chimbele and Kingele. And we've done some very interesting studies with economists that show that if we had not created the national park, we would have lost $15 million.
$15 million
Of electricity production every year.
Wow.
So from 2002 onwards, $15 million a year contributed to the economy is a big contribution that people don't tend to see. In order for the parks to generate tourism, first we have to manage the parks. When I was appointed head of national parks in 2009, the parks agency, the Agence Nationale des Parcs Nationaux, barely existed. There were 100 staff, no vehicles, one boat in a car park without a motor. And the investors that came to Gabon, some investors came and I took them around the parks and they said, wow, these parks are incredible, you have great potential. But who's managing the parks? You know, what guarantee do we have that the elephants that are here today will not be poached tomorrow? And so we had to build the National Parks Agency in order to reassure the tourism investors. Today we have several investment projects, and so we expect over the next 5 years to see, I would say, 10 to 15 hotels going into the parks, and to see the beginnings of tourism coming into Gabon. And so the real fruit of the parks in terms of jobs and the tourist economy is something that we're going to see over the next 5 to 10 years. But all of those other benefits that we get from the national parks are already there, and we benefit every day, even though we don't necessarily always think about those benefits.
President Ali Bongo Ondimba made a donation of $500,000 at the African Adaptation Initiative Fund. Can you tell us more about it? What happened there?
President Bongo will be stepping down in January as the chair of the African Head of State Climate Initiative, CAHOSC. He will be taking over as the champion for the African Adaptation Initiative. Africa is the continent that will be the most badly affected by climate change. Millions, hundreds of millions probably of Africans are going to find themselves without water and without food if we don't deal with climate change. The people of the Sahel, so our brothers and sisters in Chad and in Niger, are going to see their rainfall reduced by 50%. And already there are famines and so on in those countries.
So we are going to watch a segment where we see President Ali Bongo Ondimba speaking during the One Planet Summit and making this speech about the donation.
En tant que coordinateur du comité des chefs d'État,
as the coordinator of the Committee of African Heads of States on Climate, I would like to launch a fund mobilization campaign for the African Initiative on Adaptation towards states of the African Union in order to show the international community that the continent is still involved.
Dr. White, Ali Bongo Ondimba's presidency is clearly marked by his involvement in climate awareness, because we know that he's really fighting for climate awareness. But what about the conflict between fauna and man? Because we know that Gabon has a large population of elephants, and many people are speaking about the conflict between the elephants and the man. So what has been done about this in Gabon?
First, we should think about the cause of that elephant-human conflict. Elephants have fled parks like Minkebe because of poaching, cross-border poaching by international criminal gangs coming in from Cameroon and from other countries. The elephants have fled the parks because they're being killed, massacred in the parks, and they've been pushed towards the people. And so we've lost 1/3 of our elephants in the last 15 years, but the human-elephant conflict has become worse because we've pushed the elephants out of their home in the parks towards the people.
But there are reports that say that we have about the largest population of elephants, but you say we lost 1/3.
We have about 55% of all the forest elephants in Africa. So we have the biggest population of forest elephants in Africa. But over the last 15 years, we have lost 1/3. 25,000 elephants were killed in Minkebe. The reason we have over half the forest elephants is because 95% of elephants in DRC were killed. 90% of the elephants in Cameroon were killed. And so it's only Gabon and northern Congo that retain their elephant populations. But the elephants have moved because of this poaching pressure, because of the braconniers, because of the poachers. Also, we're seeing in the forests of Gabon, because of climate change, we're seeing the forest change, and we're seeing the amount of fruit being produced by the trees going down. It's down about 30%. So if you like to eat odika, chocolat, there's now 30% less odika in the forest of Gabon than there was 35 years ago because of climate change. And that means the elephants have less food, and so they're leaving the forest looking for food. So there are all these different factors that are pushing the elephants towards people, and that's what creates the conflict. Now, to deal with the conflict, the strategy we have chosen is to build electric fences. We went to Kenya, where they have 40 years of experience of dealing with human-elephant conflict. And we took a design that has worked very well in Kenya, and we've now, through the ANPN, the National Parks Agency, we've built about 15 of these electric barriers, which work very well. They keep the elephants out of people's crops, so the people and the elephants can live with each other in peace, if you want. So that's a very promising technology that we're trying to roll out across the country now.
Electric fences.
Exactly.
Does the Gabonese state, do we benefit from the legislation on the protection of the mangrove?
Gabon has 2 national parks which are almost entirely mangroves, Akanda and Pongara national parks. That's over 50% of all of the protected mangroves on the west coast of Africa. So we're one of the best countries when it comes to preserving the mangroves. The mangroves which surround Libreville, as the ocean rises, they will protect Libreville from the worst of the flooding.
Okay.
The mangroves, as I already said, produce all of the fish, all of the rouge, the capitaine that we eat, all of the crevettes or the gambas that we eat, all start their life in the mangrove national parks, and then as they get bigger, they come out into the ocean where we catch them. So Gabon is a leading country when it comes to preserving mangroves, but those mangroves are working for us. They're helping us to manage with the rise in the sea level. They're helping us to keep eating fish and having sustainable fisheries. And so we definitely benefit from preserving those mangroves, but the planet benefits as well.
We have been speaking about certification. Is certification one of the reforms that President Ali Bongo Ondimba has also started in these 10 years? President
Ali Bongo Ondimba announced last year, when he learnt that there was a problem with illegal forestry, he announced that by 2022, all forestry companies in Gabon have to be certified. Certification is a process whereby auditors come from the outside and make sure that the forestry companies are legal and that they are respecting their management plans and that their forest is being managed sustainably. So it's in a way, it's an additional layer of management to reinforce the management done by the Ministry of Forestry. I think that is a very courageous decision, and it's a decision that the international community is applauding us for, because they see that will guarantee that our forests are being managed professionally and sustainably.
We know that we have a strategic plan, PSGE, Gabonese strategic plan for emergence. 10 years after, what do we retain? What can we say 10 years after that we have started from this, now we have reached this level, and what are the perspectives?
I think if you look at the forestry sector, we're the Ministry of Forestry, what we have done through the Plan Stratégique Gabon Émergent and through the banning of export of raw logs and through the investments of OLAM and the CDC of Gabon has been to develop the special economic zone of Nkok, which is a bit like a magnet today. There are companies coming every week. I'm being told of a new company that is coming to build a factory at GSS. And so I expect to see the forestry industry, which today is worth about $500 million in Gabon, to Gabon. I expect over the next 5 or 6 years for us to go from $500 million to $5 billion.
10 times.
Yeah, I expect to see about 60,000 new jobs. Now, all of that is because of the solid foundation of PSGE. It's taken a while to accelerate, but now we're really seeing the fruits of those policy decisions and of the investment. And so I predict that over the next few years, we're going to see the forestry sector flourish. We're going to see the tourism sector beginning to take off in the same way. Maybe it's about 5 years behind on the curve. And we're starting to see, with this agreement that we've signed with Norway, we've started to see countries that are willing to spend hundreds of millions of dollars buying carbon dioxide emissions from Gabon, because of the way we're preserving the forests. And so I think this environmental services sector is one that's going to be very, very good for the development of Gabon.
Very good for the development of Gabon. And we thank you, Dr. Lee White, for coming. We were today with Dr. Lee White, Minister of Forest, Oceans, Environment and Climate Change. Thank you for having watching this very special news, special edition for the 10 years of presidency of our President Ali Bongo Ondimba. Thank you and see you soon.